Welcome to Cosmic Comics, Games and Collectibles, your zen of geekism. We carry comics old and new, magazines, toys, games like Pokemon, Magic, D&D. Want Godzilla, Ultraman, Star Trek, Ninja Turtles, Funko Pops? You'll find it all here. Shop our Cosmic Sound Room and pick up a record or two. Enjoy our Comic Coffee Lounge with a cup of Sasquatch coffee or a delicious menu item while geeking out over a super cool movie on our big screen. Come by and say hello to Maui. Cosmic Comic, Games and Collectibles. Superman loves us, and so will you.
And good afternoon, everybody. I am RJ Carter, Senior Managing Editor here at CriticalBlast.com. And yeah, wow, it's not our usual time, is it? So if you got your alert on your phone, don't worry, you did not oversleep. You did not pass out and wake up later this evening. We will still be back later this evening for our regularly scheduled broadcast at 7 p.m. It will be the LCS guys joining us with special guest Mike Barron. So do turn in for that. But this is one of our special international exception broadcasts where we acquiesce to the slaveries of the time zones that are enforced upon us so that we can actually talk to people without, waking people up in the neighborhood because it's 2 a.m. in other parts of the country, other parts of the world. So today we are going to be speaking with author Bonsart Bokel, and he is coming to us from Europe. Bonsart, how are you today, sir?
Good evening, and welcome. Thank you for inviting me to your stream. I have my own podcast, so I need to readjust here for a little moment. I'm doing good. It's evening in the weekend, so yeah, I'm working on various projects, so always busy.
So what part of the country are you coming from here? What part of the world are you coming from? I keep saying part of the country. Where are you?
I'm near Arnhem in the Netherlands.
Okay.
So for those history buffs out there, that's where Operation Market Garden took place. So I'm living next beside those monuments. And I'm living here for about 10 years now in this part of the Netherlands.
It's Netherlands is where my good friend Mike Jimmy Lorsha de Bruin is operating out of, the guy who creates the Life on Korra comic book. So it's good to meet more people. And of course, being in America, we're like the Netherlands. That's like, the size of like a small town, right? Do you guys know each other? Because that's the further away things get from America, the smaller it is. So we assume that if we've met two people from the same place, they've bumped into each other at the market on occasion.
Well, if you're really ingrained in the Dutch comic community, you probably have. It's not that big. We've got Dutch Comic Con. I'm not much of a con goer, never have been. We also have before cons we had fairs over here, which are outdoors and at the castle locations and stuff like that. And
I think outdoors would be healthier.
Yeah, and the convention culture came about about 10 years ago, somewhere around that time.
Okay.
With the about the same time that the Marvel movies became popular. So yeah, that was probably related.
Yeah. So y'all are just catching up on the whole what a convention is. For me, what a convention is you go someplace that you're really excited to be. You get hot and sweaty in the first half an hour, and then when you come home, you're sick. The con crud is a thing. You will, you get squeezed into a building with a bunch of people. You're going to come back with some sort of hacking cough that makes you ill and dizzy. So I thought, the outdoor ones. There's a thought. Even if you got to have tents to keep the wind from blowing your comics away or something. I'd like an outdoor convention. That'd be fun.
Yeah, well, it's how we got started over here with the costume fairs. I guess you would call them Renaissance fairs. It's
Sure.
not the same thing. Yeah, that's kind of like how things got started over here, because we have the castle parks and castle gardens, so we have the setting for fantasy. And when I started, I used to do reenactment before I got into steampunk. And when you were on those things, like people were into LARP and Tolkien, and the Trekkies or Trexters, whatever they're called these days. They had their own small things, but they probably had to go to Germany for that type of thing. Now those things are getting more common. You really notice that the more general audience are now getting into the typical nerd culture and geek culture. And then back then on Elfia, as that event is called, it was like the first one and one of the biggest of Europe. I think still is officially. And then there was a Klingon, one Klingon, and that was about as much pop culture as we got at that time. And now it's everyone is doing cosplay now.
Oh yeah,
and we didn't even have that word. We just had costuming. We dressed up and stuff. And now with the word cosplay, even though I think it's something completely different than what we used to do or still do, but now that everyone is using that word,
it's supposed to be something different, but it's just generically used for dressing up to look like a character now. But it was supposed to be like I'm in costume and I'm role playing, so it was a combination of looking like and acting like. And when you can find people who do it, and do it well, it's really cool. Thousand Faces of Cosplay is a husband and wife team. They do this Borderlands cosplay, where he I don't know the names of the characters, but he's dressed up as the big raging hulking guy because he's a big guy, and his wife is a tiny little thing, so she's like the little woman in it who's just psycho nuts, makes Harley Quinn look like a
Tiny person. Tina, probably.
Yeah. Oh, they came by my booth and just hung around for a while, and were like, I was in awe of the whole act they put on in the hallway there. They were into it, and I don't know if they scripted it because they were making use of the things on my table. I had cookies out for people. So she was like, "Cookie, I've got a cookie."
Well, the thing with the conventions is it's not very interesting for somebody like us. I also have a costume group, but we do our own thing. We do our own stories. We do our own characters. And the thing on conventions is that we notice is that you see from people how people look is that they think it's cool, but because they don't know it, they're not interested. Photographers aren't interested, so there's this strange zone of alienation around us when we walk around in that area. So
if you're your own character and nobody knows who that character is, you don't make the kind of connection with the other person.
Yeah, and it's when you go to steampunk fairs or stuff like that, it's completely different, or Elfia or things like that. Then it's like, oh, awesome! I never seen something like this. And then it's very different audiences. Yeah.
Now, speaking of steampunk, that is the genre in which you write, and I'm curious, what is your definition of steampunk, and what are the rules of that kind of a setting that these are things you can do, these are things you can't do because it's steampunk?
It's funny. I actually recently wrote a blog on that topic. For those who want to know more about steampunk, on my YouTube channel, Radio Retro Future, I also have the Steampunk Beginner's Guide. It's about at this point somewhere around 3-hour long documentary on steampunk, what it is and its various facets. Now, on the word itself, I have for me, it has 3 different meanings. One is the convention, fair culture that we just talked about, the social aspect, which is very important for steampunk as a community. I won't get into that right now. Then you've got the steampunk aesthetic, which people know mostly from video games and certain movies. And then you've got the steampunk genre, which I use as like steampunk cyberpunk in the past, which is kind of like how William Gibson, the inventor of cyberpunk, basically described it. Who also like wrote the first official steampunk called the Difference Engine. So there's those 3 things I always distinguish for these types of discussions. And when it comes to the Association of Ishtar, one thing that inspired the blog I just mentioned, I might have made a video on it, I'm not sure. But it was about historical steampunk. And because the Association of Ishtar, it's heavily inspired by SCP. Maybe you heard of that series on the internet. But it's heavily inspired by that. And the current crop of stories, which can be found on the website www.associationofishtar.com, there are about 30 stories written in a very similar style. The idea of the Association of Ishtar is that it's a multiverse, and the Association of Ishtar exists on one of these, well, planes of existence, so to say, and they investigate like all these worlds they come across in order to protect their world basically from potential threats. That's basically the concept. However, when it comes to the aesthetic of the series, and then I'm now having like all these conversations with artists that I'm trying out. I'm working on a coloring book with images based some of the novels, some based on other short stories that I wrote, and I think I actually emailed them to you.
I've gotten some pictures. Yeah.
Yeah, and the one thing is that one of the rules that I set up in my design document is that the clothes need to be about 80% accurate, at least, because I want
Accurate to the Victorian era, like 1850.
yeah. In this case, like it takes about like 1870 about this point. I also want to have some stories that start like around the Napoleonic Wars. That's when this world really starts to notice that these rifts are opening up and all this technology starts flooding in. However, it really explores, this world that is coming in contact with all these realities and how it affects their version of history, so to say. And also, in order to make all these worlds that they explore seem special, I want their world to be as mundane as possible. So, when they encounter like the really fantastical steampunk stuff that everyone associates with the conventions, it's actually special and not just like, oh, we got all that stuff too. So it's kind of like all the science fiction stuff is in the background of the world itself. Yeah.
Yeah. I've always considered it to be like, how could you get the most advanced technology using what was available and known at that time? So, it's like, how would you build a laser with gears and crystals that were known then without electronics? You don't have any electronic.
They had electricity.
They had electricity, but they didn't have electronics. They had
electric cars.
Yeah.
And they were already familiar with the concept of nuclear reactors. They just didn't have they knew the principle behind it. So yeah, I don't really understand like this fetishism for steam and gears that people have with it. To be honest,
all I ever see is people wearing felt top hats with the goggles on top. I'm like, your hat can't see.
Yeah,
the goggles come down here. You wear the goggles. And I don't know if this classifies as steampunk or not. I think it does. But did you see the recent series, The Nevers?
I know of it, but I have not seen it. I barely consume, and I consume very little, to be honest.
Okay, yeah, it's sort of like it's advertised like it's all women, but it wasn't all women. There were men and women with these powers. It's almost like Charles Xavier's School for X-Men, if it were set in the Victorian era, and one of the people with a power, one of the touched, is an inventor, and she's inventing things that are going to come to pass, and it's humorous because one of the characters is either from the future or has knowledge of the future, and she's like in one episode, the lady builds a thing to amplify somebody's voice so that it can be heard over long distances through speakers and electronics. And she's like, "Oh, did you just invent the amplifier?" And she's like, "No, it's the brightener," because you see what she's built, but they give it names that were more in association with what people knew and how they spoke back then. One of them being an electric car with a pop-up machine gun. I thought was cool.
Well, the electric car was already invented back then, so.
What did we do with it? Why didn't we keep that around? That seemed like it would have been a good.
Because they're very short distance. And
Oh,
one of the things that they have very little power. I mean, I was considering getting like, oh, maybe a hybrid car is a good idea. And my friend, he's actually a car mechanic, said, well, then you can say your what's it called, like your car goodbye, because they can pull the amount of weight we need to drag to events. So and that's it's just a matter of power and distance. And I mean, they were very popular until the 1920s. Edison actually tried to. And there's a lot of misconceptions about that. Like a lot of people say there's like this conspiracy going on with electric cars at the time. Like Edison was actually working with.
well,
It
Nikola
was
Tesla
either Ford
supposedly
or
drove
Tesla.
one.
I don't know. Was either Ford or Tesla. Probably Ford.
Yeah, he
They
hated
were
Tesla.
yeah, they were working on an electric car, and they said, yes, this is going to be the next generation of electric cars, but they never got across that power issue. So it died basically
Yeah.
until it was like reinvented
Uh,
like in the 60s.
Tesla supposedly had a vehicle that he put like some sort of square battery in it, and he just drove it for hours and miles and everywhere. And everybody said that he was faking it and that it was a fraud. And he got angry, so he took his little cube out and he went home and it never drove again. And nobody knows what powered it. Uh, but I'm wondering, is Tesla it because Tesla technology always fascinates me. The stuff that was like so cutting edge, is that acceptable in a steampunk environment, or is that sort of like the break from
Oh,
steampunk to
there seems to
modern?
be like an unwritten rule that no matter what you write, Tesla somehow needs to be mentioned or make an appearance. So,
So he is steampunk, but I
well,
would
they
see him
say
as
they
sort of
is.
the end of
They
steampunk.
kind of like claimed him. But here's the thing with steampunk. It's not very based like most steampunk is not very based in history. It's very based in pop culture and archaic pop culture in particular. Like most steampunks will know about a little bit about Spring Heel Jack and like the the Victorian characters like Jack the Ripper, of
Jack the
course.
Ripper, yes.
But ask them who Otto von Bismarck is, and they're like, "Oh, that's the battleship, right?" You know,
Well, named after him. So,
yeah. But that's like I tried. I actually experimented with this when I gave presentations on these events. Like, oh, do you know who to make this point? Like, do you know who Otto von Bismarck is? And this was before the Song of Sabaton, so maybe like one hand wrote up, "Oh, that's a battleship." So yeah, that's
yeah, and a lot of it is inspired by Jules Verne and H.G. Wells, because they were writing all these cutting edge sci-fi concepts. Again, using what technology they had at the time. A time machine with pulleys and levers, and like there's how do you make a pulley open up temporal warps? But it was there, and it's what he did. So tell us more about your steampunk universe, which is the Association of Ishtar, which is sort of the overarching branch of all your novels, because you've got the Wrench in the Machine, which is an Association of Ishtar book, but you've also got like S-36, the Call Girl, which is again an Association of Ishtar tale. You've got this world in which individual books occur.
yeah. So the original idea of the Association of Ishtar is related to the steampunk beginner's guide that I made. That's how people know me. And I got a lot of questions because of that. Like, oh, I'm experimenting with, I want to write my own steampunk world, blah, blah, blah. How would you do this and this? And I wasn't writing myself. Like I dabbled in writing before, but I never really finished anything. My first venture into writing, actual writing fiction, was a radio program for a mod for Fallout 4 called Radio Retro Future for Fallout, where I played a role of a radio DJ in the Fallout universe. And he's playing like all these steampunk bands. I also had a lot of contacts because of my podcast with steampunk based musicians. So that's how that kind of came about, and that was like my real venture into writing fiction. And people really enjoyed that, called it like their favorite radio station because it was it was more radio stations, and that's the one they liked the most. So And then I also had my own character, Dankert Lexicon. You used him in the thumbnail of this video, and he had no real backstory. Like I played him in the Steampunk Beginner's Guide, but he had no real background. Like I had ideas, but never came anything to fruition. So I kind of like wanted to create a world for him, and he became a curator of world histories. Like you can have an insurance with him that in case something might happen to your world, we're not saying that it happens, but you know,
nice planet you got here.
you have a nice world history. It would be a shame if something happened to it, you know.
Yeah.
And you can like have an insurance policy with him that he stores like your world history. So that kind of like and then that's also like wholly connected to the multiverse idea. And you know, he's in this city. They call it the capital of the multiverse, but really it's just you know, a whole bunch of scavengers living.
Yours is the first time I've heard of the multiversal concept being combined with the steampunk concept, because usually when steampunk and multiverse are involved, it's steampunk is one of the universes in a multiverse. It's sort of like, you know, hey, you got the modern day Batman and Superman, but over here you've got Gotham by Gaslight, which is an alternative history. With yours, I would imagine that most of the multiversal aspects are steampunk, but still different from each other.
Yes. Yes.
Am I guessing that correctly?
Yeah, well, I mean, the idea also was to have like stories concerning like different worlds that they are visiting. But you know, I want to see you know, Mayas interact with alien technology, or you know, African tribes interact with such technologies, and whatever, you know, all these, and see what becomes a dominant culture through means like that, or you know, have them have these unique problems. Let's say the situation of Frostpunk, where you know, there is like this massive ice age coming, and they need to create like these special settlements, you know, with massive generators at the center to survive this ice age. So you know, I want to see that kind of world. So I'm trying to get like other writers involved to develop such worlds. And that's also like one of the reasons that I want the world of the Association of History to be as like mundane as possible. So all these worlds remain actually special, and not, oh, it's just another steampunk themed world.
Yeah.
So it really. Oh, go ahead.
No, I was just.
Okay. Now, so for me, I really wanted to be like, how do people of various ages, eras, and cultures interact with their technology around them, and how does that influence them, or you know, do they worship it? Like one of the characters who appears in the book, like the Range in the Machine, is actually a kind of like a mishmash of various short stories added together, and see how they interact with one another. So I already wrote a number of short stories to experiment, like how does the world work and stuff like that. That's how, like, it's a one big world building process, really. Each short story explores like a various aspect, either of the association or the world, or it's just an idea that I'm playing around with. And one of them was, there was this whole discussion at the time about, you know, magic and steampunk, you know, is it possible, blah, blah, blah. And you're probably familiar with the word Clark Tech.
I don't think I am, actually.
Oh, okay. Clark Tech, created by Arthur C. Clarke.
Okay.
And it's basically the concept that, well, you know, in order to explore like science fiction, you have to go into the fantastical. And that means you're creating technology that's indistinguishable from magic. Let's say the Star Trek transporter, for example. You know, is it possible? Well, probably not. Still, it's fun to play with the idea of what would people do with it.
Yeah.
Even though that the transporter is probably a terrible example, because it was created as a cost measuring.
Exactly.
Thing,
and then, you know, it was created by people who didn't think far enough in advance to say, if we can teleport, why do we still have ships?
Yeah. Well, that's also a thing, right? I mean, well, the whole why do we have ships can be solved with, well, the transporters have a limited range, so that doesn't bother me. But it's one of those technologies that become so powerful. You have to make up excuses why it does not work. So it starts working against you rather than with you. And that's also something in this multiverse. If you are staying away from your plane of origin for too long, you fall apart. It's called traveler's disease, and they don't know what's causing it. So they are constantly looking, either they're experimenting with to see what happens, or they're trying to find technology to counteract this. So it's a very important part of the world, actually, which is actually a rule to prevent the kind of shenanigans you have in Star Trek, where they've got like all this awesome technology, except when it would come out really useful in a particular situation.
Yes,
Um,
then it has to fail.
yeah, so then it has to fail. So, and that's also, that I give workshops in writing, and it's one of those things, you have this idea for an object or technology. Well, try write a story with that and see what happens. And then they never write the story because they created something so powerful, and you cannot make any conflict with it. There's nothing to make such things interesting.
Exactly.
So
Uh, in the idea of multiverses, are you familiar with Larry Niven's All the Myriad Ways?
no, well, I every time I come on a podcast, I hear like new experiments with multiverses. So
Yeah, well, this is an old, God, it's at least 40 years old. But he had a world where they were exploring multiverses, and these were like the parallel dimensions, and where things had gone differently. And they were bringing back technology, and what they were finding out was that because every decision causes a split of some kind, they'd have like a band and say, the dot here in the middle is you. This is home, and you're going this way on the band or this way on the band. When you're ready, come back to the dot. Well, because you make a decision of where on the band to come back to, you were splitting time, and the dot was becoming a little strip. So it was like, well, because so where on the strip do I really put the thing? And they're like, well, it doesn't matter, because wherever you pick, another you is going to pick a different spot on it. Until two people actually made the same decision and came back to the same location and intersected with each other and got killed. It caused this huge crash. But it was he called it the broadening of the bands, and it was very dystopic kind of look at multiverses, because he didn't focus on, wow, what can we discover? He focused on people who were killing themselves because they were so miserable that they thought, well, if I'm this miserable and I kill myself, in another timeline, I'm happy and I live.
now there is an object. It's called C29, Pandora's mirror. And it's actually about a mirror that shows a person like variations of themselves in other timelines.
Nice.
And one tends, and yeah, it's actually the first one that got published in a friend of mine, which is funny because it's. I also made a video on it, so you can listen to it if you're interested. But yeah, it's basically the association discovers this thing on a fairground somewhere. However, by the time they reach it, it turns out like a religious cult has gotten away with it, called the Lions of Judah. I have not written that much about them, but I want to. I do have art of them now, so that's something. But yeah, they're kind of like a Lovecraftian Christians. Like they are Christians. They are pretty hardcore Catholics. They have like this monastic order. However, their perfecti, like their highest members, they're all have congealed with interdimensional beings. So their chief monks are like these horrible Lovecraftian monstrosities, but Christian. They're like the Old Testament version of Christianity.
Oh, Cthulhu
So
died for your sins.
yeah. Well, but not exactly that. I mean, Jesus,
Yeah.
as far as I'm aware, in this universe is still, well, whatever the interpretation is at the time. but yeah, they have like they're like it's all about like the internal warfare where they compare like these outsiders like with literal devils, and they're basically harnessing the powers of hell to serve the
Ah.
powers of God. So that's how they interpret them, their own beings, and they see like all these other worlds as all these either teaching tools sent by God, like this is what the world could be if you give in to like these particular vices, or as literal planes of hell. So
And I
there,
suppose they would see the ones where everything was better as temptations to be avoided.
probably. I have not explored them in that facet yet, but that's also like one of the things I hope other writers will get involved in and see what they make of these cults. And yeah, we'll
Right.
see.
Well,
But
the current book is The Wrench in the Machine. It's a interconnected short story collection.
yes, kind
Uh,
of, yeah.
and
Well,
and
that was
that's
the original intent, but it
that was the
became really
intent.
a story into itself with its own characters. And yeah, but one of the main characters, S06, yeah, that's where I wanted to talk about Clark Tex. He is like a girl who literally believes that her whole cyberpunk society and like their magnificent supreme level of technology is like magic. So she has like this whole concept like, oh yeah, I need to like arrange my circuits in particular ways for it to work. And then she gets trapped in the world of the Association of Ishtar, where they're still at well, kind of like Victorian level, and they're driving. She's driving them up the wall because she has like this entire aesthetic for technology, and then they need to convince her. Oh, actually, it's magic, but it's turning them insane because
It's what was it? Technomancy.
yeah, kind of like that. But yeah, the thing is that her people won't let her return because she's a threat to the system. That's also kind of like the where the title of the machine of
Like a
the book comes
virus.
in. Yeah, yeah. She's a virus, so they let her stay. So that's how her short story ends. In the book, it's years later. She's now abandoned like all these beliefs. She actually dabbled in Druid, like in alternative religions, to kind of find purpose. And Alborough, who's an inspector, he encounters one of these outsiders, S36 in this case, and yeah, he finds her by coincidence during his investigation, and she opens like up this whole idea of multiverses, and then he realizes like, oh, we're not at the center of existence or anything. So, and it's like a really an outsider's perspective into this world of the multiverses. And like he encounters like all these cults and people that are all like, oh yeah, for us this is normal. And then he is like, okay, but it's also really a lot about the politics surrounding it, and how people deal with well, in this case the elite and public relations and stuff like that. And well, a lot of things that are nothing more but people kicking their problems down the road. Let the next administration
Oh,
deal with it.
sure.
So also a lot of that. So it does not put like the Association of Eastern the most positive of lights, but it's kind of like a primer, like for what this whole multiverse stuff would mean for the ordinary person in that world, while also introducing like several short stories, ideas, how they can interconnect. And it starts mundane. I kind of like imagined it. It started like those typical like A Touch of Frost, the Dose type of British police procedural series, and then it just goes into the whole of Craftian stuff, and maybe even a little bit into the anime-esque, video game-esque elements that people associate with steampunk. So I try to have this whole escalation in there where it goes from the mundane to the insane.
It sounds like this world of yours would be ripe for some RPG manuals. Or have you explored that already, or are you planning to explore that?
Well, right now I kind of have like a 5-year plan where I'm writing more stuff. I'm gathering more people, but yeah, I absolutely. A lot of people have requested this already. Like, will you make a game or something? And yeah, I'm absolutely open to the idea. I'd love to be a writer for that. Um, I already have so much stuff to do. I don't know if I want to be involved in the actual like creation of the system and stuff like that. But
Yeah, contract
I
that
would
out.
love to. I hope to have like a game in the next 5 years, like a board game or something, or
All
maybe
right.
like something simple, starting with a card game, so we have a good excuse to make more art.
Yeah.
I am working on a coloring book. That much of that art will also appear in the hardcover version that I want to publish of the Wrench in the Machine, maybe together with the next novel. I'm not sure about the timing yet. Like, I don't have a publisher, I don't have deadlines, so the only thing that gets in the way of me is me at this time.
I'm quite familiar with that problem.
Yeah.
So in that line, then what is next? Are you going to you've done a short comic book story set in the world? Are you going to do any more graphic novel work, or are you going to do another?
Yeah, well, one of the reasons that I am doing the coloring book is to get to know more artists. Like, I had one, but he now has a day job, which is also drawing, so he's not very eager to do more drawing
Yeah.
at this point. So, yeah, but I am currently getting acquainted with various artists and, see with whom I can have a fun time collaborating, and trust with that responsibility. Yeah, and I also have never done crowdfunding before, so I'm also looking into, well, that's probably something that I'm gonna have to do.
I can put you in touch with experts in both of those areas.
Okay, well, I that would be greatly appreciated, sir. So yeah, I am I want to do it all. That's the thing. But right now I'm looking at what's realistic, and I think um, I need to create a bigger fan base. That's one of the things. And people are really digging the concept. People love the mystery in particular. People who see the hello Jim are watching the he's one of the artists, by the way. He's currently he recently made a wonderful drawing of the lines of Judah that I just mentioned. And yeah, he we let me see where I was. Yeah. So first step is to build up a fan page, make sure that the books are selling. So I know there are people who are actually interested in reading more. And yeah, I also want to know, like, what do these people want, because right now I'm also writing like kind of a spin-off series that's also included in the comic to pad it out more, because the comic itself is rather short. So there is a companion story that's kind of explores like a penal legion that has the task of fighting like all these larger outsider invasions. However, they actually have robots to help them with that. And these are called the Coffin Girls, which is actually an historical reference. The Casket Girls, or the Coffin Girls, were women who were going to the French prison colonies, either as prostitutes or as colonists. So if the penal colonists, so the criminals who were sent there, had somebody to marry. That was the idea. Like, we're gonna send criminals over to Chinea, and then we leave them there in the local vicinity, so they're not coming home, and then they'll marry like these other women. So that's where the name Coffin Girls comes from.
Okay. So we'll look forward to all of that. And again, like I said, I'll put you in touch with some people who do crowdfunding and who do art, if that's the way you want to pursue it. In the meantime, we'll look for more of the Association of Ishtar in the form of books. Do you want to drop your channel name down here, and we'll in the private chat, and I'll put it out in the public chat here for folks.
Okay. Well, the Radio Retro Future. Did I spell that right? I think so. I also have the Retro Future Research Foundation. Did I spell that right? I did not.
Are these YouTube channels?
These are both YouTube channels, yes. And then we have a website for the Association of Ishtar. The ishtar.com. There we go. Yeah, and there are links to videos we already made on the Association of Ishtar. I'm working on recording all the chapters per video. It's quite a long book. It's quite a long novel, so it's quite well. Actually, it's for the remainder of December. The paperback novel of The Wrench in the Machine is on discount, so get that while that lasts.
You can get it for $6 on Kindle right now. So,
yes, indeed.
and
It's a
hello,
very,
Jason.
it's quite a long book. Oh, good day.
I'm
I've
going to see
also been
Spider-Man
on-
tomorrow, so don't
Yeah.
spoil it for me, Jason.
Right. Yeah, I've also been on Sci-Fi for Me for those who want to see me there. So I'm working on a lot of videos as well. We also do costuming. We've got some amazing photos of my last costume, made in the collaboration of a friend of mine. I'm happy that I'm attracting some real talent right now. I just wish I would do more of them, but I'm already. I also have a normal day job, so yeah.
Oh, doesn't that suck? That always gets me motivated.
Well, I mean, if more people want to, I'm also looking for volunteers to help out, so I can actually focus more on the writing and getting content out there. You can also support us on various places like Subscribestar and Radioactive Future. Matter of fact, if you like coloring books, you by supporting us on places like Subscribestar and Patreon, you can actually get the coloring plates for free, the digital versions of both The Wrench in the Machine and S36 will be available, and you also get previews of chapters of stuff I want to publish but have not yet done so, like a short story that is the sequel to S36, Lights in the Dark. So
Okay. I have thrown out once more the link to your Amazon page where all of your work can be, all of your Amazon work can be accessed. So, and folks, that is a, oh, now I'm echoing back.
I'm not hearing it.
No, because it's coming from your side.
Oh, that's strange.
It just now started happening, so I don't know why that happened. We've gone almost an hour here. Now it's gone, but I have thrown the link out there, and folks, that is our Amazon affiliate link. So if you do click on that, that does help our channel out a bit. If you go through and pick up these works, they're not that expensive. So if you are a steampunk kind of person, or if you don't know what it is but it sounds interesting and you want to learn a little bit more about it, there's your jumping on point. Get in there and get you some steampunk fiction. All right, Bonsart, I think we've covered just about everything. Is there anything left out that you want to make sure people know about?
Well, I already said that there are about 30 short stories freely available on our website. So, and also the first chapters on the audiobook are also available. So if you're not certain that this is worth your $20, you can check out that before buying. And no, I think that's about it. Everything's on the website.
All right, and that website is www.associationofishtar.com. Also put out there in the chat for people to click on. With that, Bonsart, thank you so much for coming on the stream today and letting us know about your work and what your particular take is on this genre that fascinates so many people. And look at this, Phantasmagorical just subbed to your channel. So thank you so much, Phantasmagorical.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
Everybody in the chat, we appreciate you so much being here. We don't have a show if you're not here. We're just a tree falling in the woods otherwise. So, we're glad you're here. And as always, while you were here, we just hope you had a blast. I almost said good night, but not quite yet. Come back later tonight at 7 o'clock Central, 8 p.m. Eastern when Mike Barron joins the LCS guys, and we will see you then.